Sometimes you get those mornings where you just don't want to get up. This morning for me, it was a little bit of a struggle, but if you drive through those, once you're out in the open, you'll really appreciate actually making the effort to get up. Now, these clouds are forming and there's no clouds on the horizon, so I'm hoping the sun will come up and light the underside of those. But the hard thing is here that the Malverns are pointing pretty much south, and that's southeast. I was thinking up here where you've got this nice arc and the frost is on the grass, but it doesn't seem to work quite well. So I might go back down and use the path a little bit. But the only problem with that is there'll be lots of walkers coming up and messing up the shot. So I'm gonna have a wander, see what I can find. Now with that cloud being over to the southeast, it's gonna be tricky to get it in the composition. The one I've found, and it's not that amazing, but it should be all right, is that I've found one of these thorny bushes in the foreground. I've got some frosty grass, and then this kind of leads off towards the rest of the Malvern Hills. Hoping it'll work, so I'm just going to sit and wait for that sun to rise. Now the Malvern Hills are really tricky to photograph because along the top there are so many walkers that all of the grass is worn away and you basically get this big brown muddy patch that runs pretty much along the whole length of them. It's great that people get out and walk, but it makes it trickier when you're a photographer. And also I know that I'm probably adding to that by hiking as well. Those clouds are fizzling away. There are a few light clouds in the sky, so I put the 15mm on. I'm hoping I can get these lines coming in to that end point. I bracketed my shots because the sky is really bright and the land is really dark. Now, the one thing I don't like about this shot is this big brown mess on the right-hand side. That's pretty frustrating. So that's why I might go for a portrait orientation as well. I'll take a shot now. I should really turn that noise off because it's irritating me, let alone anyone else that walks past. With the 15mm, it is flattening out landscape a bit. Just hoping these clouds stick around. Yeah. Stick around, clouds, you know you want to. So I've switched over to the 17-28, and having that zoom range means that I can play around with the composition quite a bit. The clouds are still teasing. I think I've got another 20 minutes or so before the sun comes up. But it's looking good at the moment. Now, a lot of people will say to use the hyperfocal distance, where you kind of calculate 1/3 into the shot. But the way I look at it, that's far too much of a faff and far too much thinking, especially when you wake up first thing in the morning and you're out for a sunrise. What I do is focus on something kind of halfway into the shot, take the shot and just check it. I'll use the magnifier tool, check the foreground, see how in focus that is in the actual shot that you've taken, and then check the background. If the foreground is in focus but the background isn't, you've got to focus a little bit further into the shot. If the foreground is out of focus, you've got to focus closer to the camera. And in playing around with it and playing around with your focal point, you'll start to learn where you need to focus when you're really close to the subject like this. Now, if you're on a tall tripod and you're a couple of meters away from that foreground element and you're shooting with apertures between f11 and f16, it shouldn't matter too much and you can focus on your infinity point and everything pretty much will be in focus. But it's good to get into the habit of checking your photograph after you've taken it. This tends to work for me and I'll end up with a shot with everything in focus from front to back without the need of focus stacking. Now, if I was much closer to this foreground, I would then have to focus stack. But most of the time you don't really need to, especially when you use those smaller apertures. I've also got my trusty RX10. I always bring this along and I always find I get some nice shots with this camera. Make sure I've got a memory card in. That's one problem with it being IC. Do tend to slip and slide around a little bit. As you can see from that shot that I just took, the sun is starting to catch those clouds. It's not quite catching the clouds in my frame, but it's catching them over there. So I'm hoping this continues through the shot. Also, Breeden Hill looks pretty cool as well. Focus. one problem with this camera. It does struggle to focus sometimes. Come on, focus. It seems to need a really sharp edge to focus with. Again, I've got it in rapid fire. I prefer to do this because I'll fire off a few shots, and even though some of them might be a little bit blurry, I'll tend to get one that's nice and steady. Probably also take this off. Don't think I'll be needing that for the rest of the day. So the sun's poking out now, and the clouds are kind of still there. Take a close-up of this. This looks pretty cool. Now I seem to keep doing this, but I've left my filters in the car yet again. So I'm having to bracket my shots instead of just having the filter cutting out the brightness of that sky. This is one way to get around in not having filters, or when you forget your filters like I've just done. Right, I think what I'm going to try and do is go up to the top of the beacon and take a shot the other way before the light goes, but it's going to be a bit of a rush. So time to pack up. Now I'm going to keep my trusty RX10 clipped on my shoulder, because you never know, I might get a few different compositions on the way. Now I'm chasing the light because it's just about to go behind the clouds over there, but I found this composition. I like the kind of the sweeping arc in the foreground down to the hills in the background. The sun's really going behind those clouds. And if I take a shot with the RX, this is what's happening over there. Now the sun's gone behind the clouds. There are a few gaps in those clouds as well, so hopefully the sun will keep peeking out every now and then. That was a slog. I always keep going on about the RX10, but it's fantastic for locations like this. I can get close-ups of different parts of the landscape. I can grab those different bits. If you've only got, say, an A6600, or if you've got one camera like the A7 III, getting something like the 100 to 400 is really good, because again, you can pick parts of the landscape out. It's fantastic for that, and I just love it. I love that telephoto look. This is really annoying sometimes when it focuses or when it doesn't focus, but when it does grab focus and you've got good light, you can get some fantastic photos with this, even though it's a tiny little sensor. Whew, it's cold. There's so much to photograph, and even though it's freezing, I just don't want to leave. Now today turned into one of those days where I didn't really want to leave the place. But I got loads of shots, I got a time lapse, and it was just a fantastic day out. The temperature's coming up a little bit now, the sun's rising loads, so I'm going to head home and grab a cup of coffee.